The security guard's hand closed around his collar before he could even blink. 1 second, Ethan Okafor was pushing his mop bucket toward the exit. The next, 2 uniformed men had lifted him off his feet and were dragging him through the marble-floored lobby of First Pinnacle Bank, his bank, while a crowd of elegantly dressed guests turned to stare. "Thief!" The branch manager, Mr. Baligan, was pointing from across the room, his voice cutting through the hum of the grand opening ceremony like a blade. That cleaner broke into the executive filing room. He was photographing confidential documents. The crowd parted. Men in Italian suits. Women dripping in gold jewelry. Bank executives. Invited politicians. Camera crews from 3 different television stations. All of them watching as Ethan was shoved forward, his gray cleaner's uniform disheveled, his mop cap half hanging from his head. Someone laughed. Then more people joined in. "These area boys will do anything," a woman in a red dress muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Lock him up," said another man, snapping photos with his phone. Then from near the back of the room, a young woman's voice broke through the laughter, sharp and desperate. "Stop it. Stop. He hasn't done anything wrong." Nobody listened to her. The security guards pushed Ethan toward the front doors, his feet barely touching the floor. Mr. Baligan was already adjusting his tie, preparing to return to his prepared remarks. The ceremony would continue. The cleaner would be handed over to police. The world would keep spinning. Except Ethan stopped walking. He planted his feet. The guards strained. He shook them off with a calmness that confused everyone in the room, then turned and walked, not toward the door, but toward the stage. The murmuring stopped. He climbed the 3 steps to the platform, reached the podium, and gently removed the microphone from its stand. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan looked out at the frozen crowd, then at Mr. Baligan, whose face had gone from smug to pale in under 4 seconds. "My name," Ethan said quietly, "is Ethan Okafor. And I own this bank." The room did not erupt. It did not gasp dramatically like in the films. It simply went very, very still, as if every person inside had forgotten how to breathe. And then the camera crews started moving. Nobody knew yet why a billionaire would spend a month disguised as a cleaner inside the institution he had built from the ground up. Nobody knew what he had seen. Nobody knew what he had found. But all of that was about to come out. This is where the story truly begins. Ethan Okafor was 31 years old, and by every visible measure, his life was perfect. He had built his first tech startup at 22, sold it at 25 for a sum that most people in Lagos would not earn in 5 lifetimes, and used the proceeds to co-found a fintech company that eventually became the backbone of First Pinnacle Bank, a modern commercial bank designed from scratch to serve everyday Nigerians alongside corporate clients. He was featured on magazine covers. He gave keynote speeches. His name appeared in the same sentences as words like visionary and disruptor. Publicly, he was untouchable. Privately, he was exhausted in a way that money could not fix. It had started 3 years earlier, when a woman named Sola, whom he had dated for 18 months and had genuinely considered marrying, was revealed to be passing his private business strategies to a rival company. She had not even been ashamed when he confronted her. She had simply looked at him and said, "Ethan, you're too trusting. That was always your weakness." Before Sola, there was Adiz, who leaked private photographs after he refused to transfer property into her name. And before Adiz, there was a string of women who admired the lifestyle without ever once asking who he was when the cameras were off. He had stopped trying after Sola. He had poured everything into the bank, into the vision, into the work. But sitting alone in his Ikoyi penthouse the night before the bank's opening, something in him had cracked open. He had called his mentor, Chief Adabi, a quiet, gray-haired economist who had guided him since university, and said something he had never said out loud before. "I don't know who truly sees me anymore. Not Ethan the person. Just Ethan the check." Chief Adabi had been silent for a long moment. Then he said, Then go somewhere where the check doesn't exist. And watch. You might be surprised by what you find. Ethan had stared at the ceiling for an hour after that call. By morning, he had a plan. He would not walk into his own bank as the owner. He would enter as a cleaner, hired through a legitimate contractor firm, placed on the ordinary roster. He would work the morning shift. He would mop floors, carry waste bins, wipe down glass. He would observe his staff, his managers, his systems, all of it, without the filter of titles and fear that his presence usually created. He told only 2 people, Chief Adabi, and his head of legal, who made sure the contractor arrangement was genuine and above board. Everyone else, including the staff, the security team, and Mr. Baligan himself, knew only that the owner would make a formal appearance at the grand opening ceremony on the 30th day. He had expected to learn something about his business. He had not expected to find Chisom. Chisom Nwosu was 26, and she had learned early that the world did not hand you anything. Her father, a civil servant named Mr. Emmanuel Nwosu, had died when she was 17 from complications nobody in their neighborhood could afford to properly treat. Since then, it had been just her and her mother, Mrs. Patricia Nwosu, a woman of deep faith and quiet strength who had recently been diagnosed with a kidney condition that required medication costing more than Chisom's monthly salary. Chisom worked a temporary contract at First Pinnacle Bank through the same administrative services company that had placed Ethan. Her duties were modest, serving morning tea to staff, sorting incoming files for the operations unit, helping the front desk when the queue grew too long. She was not a banker. She had a diploma in business administration from a polytechnic in Enugu, a hopeful application to a university part-time program she could not yet afford, and a small notebook she carried in her apron pocket in which she wrote down new vocabulary she encountered in the office, words she intended to eventually use. She was not flashy. She did not gossip. When the female bankers sat in clusters at lunch talking about the mysterious billionaire owner and how he had better be young and single, Chisom ate her rice quietly and thought about how much her mother's next prescription would cost. She was not invisible either. She simply did not waste her presence on people who were not worth it. On the 3rd day of Ethan's disguise, he knocked over his mop bucket near the stairs to the 2nd floor. It was an accident the first time. After that, he did it deliberately, because of what had happened afterward. The water spread across the tiles in a wide, embarrassing puddle. 2 junior bankers stepped around it without looking at him, one of them clicking her tongue in irritation. A senior officer said, "Be careful now, don't give us wahala," and kept walking. Then Chisom appeared from the corridor, carrying a tray of tea. She saw the puddle, saw him standing there with the empty bucket, and set her tray down on the nearest surface. She went to the cleaning supply alcove, returned with extra rags, and crouched beside him on the wet floor. "Shift it this side," she said, nodding toward the bucket. He shifted it. They cleaned the water together, side by side, on their knees on the marble floor of a bank lobby, while people walked around them. When they were done, she stood and dusted her hands on her apron. She looked at him directly, not with pity, not with condescension, just with the ordinary human regard of someone who had done a practical thing and was ready to move on. "Everybody deserves respect," she said simply, "no matter their job. Don't let anybody make you feel less." Then she picked up her tray and continued down the corridor. Ethan stayed crouched over the now dry floor for several seconds after she had gone. In the weeks that followed, something grew between them that neither of them had planned for. It started with small things. Chisom, who discovered that Ethan, whom she knew only as Emeka, the name on his contractor badge, took his lunch break at the same quiet stairwell at the back of the building every day, began sitting nearby. Not to impress him. Simply because it was the only corner of the building where people left you alone. They talked about unimportant things at first. The heat. The price of tomatoes. The strange behavior of a particular air conditioning unit in the 3rd floor corridor that rattled every time the generator switched on. Then the conversations deepened. He told her he was from Abuja originally. She told him about Enugu, about her father, about the small house she shared with her mother in Mushin. He listened without trying to fix anything, which was not something she was accustomed to. She told him about her notebook of words. He asked to see it. She showed him, a little embarrassed, and he read through it with such genuine curiosity that she laughed. She told him about her mother's kidneys. He sat with that information in silence, which was more respectful than any response she could think of. She did not know he had immediately identified the specific medication regime she had described and made a mental note to ensure it was covered through the bank's community health initiative before the month was out. He was falling in love with her. He knew it. He also knew it was dishonest to continue without telling her the truth, and this tension sat in his chest every morning when he put on the gray uniform. He justified the delay the way people in that situation always do. Just a few more days. Just until I understand a little more. Just until I'm sure. But the days kept passing, and the revelation kept being postponed. In the meantime, other things were becoming impossible to ignore. Ethan was a detail-oriented person. He had built systems for a living, and he could sense when something inside a system was wrong the way some people sensed weather changes in their joints. He had noticed Mr. Balogun in his first week, not because the man was obviously corrupt, but because of the way he moved. Too smooth. Too confident in a way that was not earned by performance but by protection. The kind of confidence that comes from believing you are untouchable. Ethan started paying attention to the office patterns. Cleaners, unlike most staff, had remarkable access. They moved through rooms at unusual hours. People stopped noticing them, and that invisibility, which had been intended as social commentary, turned out to have practical value. Over 3 weeks, cleaning offices during the late shift, Ethan observed enough to understand the shape of what was happening. Multiple accounts for inactive shell businesses, all opened within the same 2-week window, all with unusually large transaction limits approved by the branch, all moving money in patterns that matched classic layering techniques used in financial fraud. He had not imagined finding this when he arrived in his gray uniform. But here it was. He documented what he could without access to the actual system, using methods he had learned from 15 years in fintech. He was careful. He was precise. And he was patient, which was not difficult when the grand opening, the day he documented what he could without access to the actual system, using methods he had learned from 15 years in fintech. He was careful. He was precise. And he was patient, which was not difficult when the grand opening, the day he had always intended to reveal himself, was still a few weeks away. What he had not counted on was Chisom walking into the middle of it. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The third-floor meeting room, ordinarily used for routine credit reviews, had been booked under a vague internal reference code. Chisom had been sent to collect used teacups from the corridor outside. She had pushed the door slightly and then frozen. She had not been inside the room. She had heard fragments only. But what she heard was enough to make her stomach turn. Names. Numbers. A reference to a transaction being cleared before the owner shows up. She stepped back without being seen. She said nothing to anyone. But Mr. Balogun's assistant had been in the corridor and had noticed her standing there. That evening, Chisom was called into the assistant's small office and told that her contract performance review had flagged concerns and that her engagement might be terminated early. Chisom went home and sat with her mother in their small parlor and said nothing about it. She told herself it was coincidence. She told herself not to borrow trouble. She did not sleep well that night. Ethan found out about the meeting the next morning, through a quietly circulated note from the assistant to a security officer, which he saw when he collected waste papers from the executive floor bin. He read it in the stairwell with a feeling that was colder and more serious than he had expected. They were watching Chisom. Which meant she was in danger. Which meant his timeline had just shortened significantly. The grand opening was 6 days away. He made the decision to let it proceed. Cutting it short would create chaos before the evidence was fully assembled. But he moved quickly in those 6 days. He made encrypted calls to his head of legal from the parking lot during his lunch breaks. He ensured that everything he had gathered was properly structured and ready to hand to the appropriate authorities the moment he stepped back into his own identity. He also tried to tell Chisom the truth twice. The first time, he started to speak and she interrupted him to ask if he had eaten that day, because she had brought extra EBA and soup and the container was getting heavy. The moment broke and he did not retrieve it. The second time, she was telling him about her mother's latest test results. Better than expected, the doctor was cautiously optimistic, and she was so luminously happy that the words he had prepared went silent in his throat. He sat there watching her talk and thought, I have been dishonest with this woman who has been nothing but honest with me, and the weight of it was considerable. He told himself he would tell her everything at the ceremony. Publicly. So there would be no room for misunderstanding about what his intentions were. He had not imagined what would happen the day before. The morning of the day before the grand opening, a security announcement was made. A serious breach had been reported. Confidential documents from the executive filing room had been photographed and removed. This was, of course, manufactured. There had been no breach. But Mr. Baligan, who had now identified Ethan as a surveillance risk and had likely guessed more than he had revealed, had decided to remove the threat before the ceremony. When the security guards came for Ethan, he was pushing his mop cart past the first-floor teller area. They did not give him a chance to speak. One grabbed his collar, one took his arm, and they walked him through the building at speed, through every department, past every member of staff, with Mr. Baligan following behind with his hands folded, explaining loudly to the witnesses that lined the corridor. This man was found with photographs of sensitive files. This is a criminal matter. We have zero tolerance. Some staff looked away. Some watched with open curiosity. Some smiled. Chisom heard the commotion from the operations floor and came to the railing above. She saw what was happening. She saw Ethan's face, calm and unreadable, and something in her moved past shock into a clear, uncomplicated certainty. She came downstairs. She moved through the gathering crowd and placed herself beside him in front of everyone. He's innocent, she said loudly. I work with him every day. He is not a criminal. Someone behind her muttered, mind your business, madam. Mr. Baligan turned to her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Your contract, he said quietly, is terminated effective immediately. Security, please escort both of them out. Chisom did not flinch. She looked at Ethan, and what she said next she said only to him, quietly enough that only he could hear it. Whatever is happening, I believe you. That's enough for me. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Tomorrow, he said, just as quietly. I promise. Tomorrow, everything will make sense. She did not understand what he meant. But she held his gaze and nodded. They were walked out of the bank together, into the Lagos afternoon heat, and the doors closed behind them. The grand opening ceremony of First Pinnacle Bank was held the following day at 11 o'clock in the morning. The atrium had been transformed. Flowers, banners, a press wall bearing the bank's logo, a row of seats for dignitaries. The governor's representative was present. There were investors from 3 countries. Television cameras. A small band playing softly in the corner. Mr. Baligan stood at the center of it all, magnificent in a grey agbada, prepared to welcome the bank's unseen owner, a man he had met only in boardrooms before the month began, a man whose face the general staff still mostly knew only from photographs. The speeches began. Mr. Baligan was introduced as the outstanding branch manager who had personally overseen the smooth launch. Applause. He smiled at the cameras. Then the side door of the atrium opened. The man who entered was wearing a navy blue fitted suit and shoes that the fashion writers in the room would later describe in considerable detail. He was calm. He was unhurried. His face was familiar to some in the room, less familiar to others. The cleaners and junior staff, the ones who had seen this face every day for a month above a gray uniform, were the first to react. There was a collective intake of breath from that section of the room that preceded the general recognition by several seconds. By the time Ethan Okafor reached the stage and took the microphone, Mr. Balogun's smile had collapsed into something that was trying very hard to still look like composure and failing. "Good morning," Ethan said. "My name is Ethan Okafor, and I am the founder and chief executive officer of First Pinnacle Bank. Many of you are meeting me for the first time today in this capacity. Some of you have already met me, though not in this suit." He paused. "For the past 30 days, I worked in this building as a contract cleaner. I mopped your floors. I emptied your bins. I wiped your glass doors. I sat in your stairwells. And I watched. The silence in the room was the kind that precedes a storm. I watched how staff treated those with less power than them. I watched how customers were spoken to. I watched how people behaved when they believed no one of consequence was looking." He let that sit. "And I also discovered something I was not expecting to find." His legal team entered through the same side door, accompanied by 2 officers from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. "Over the past 3 weeks, I gathered evidence of systematic financial fraud being conducted through this branch, involving the creation of fictitious business accounts and the laundering of funds through coordinated transactions. The full documentation has been submitted to the EFCC. Arrests will proceed accordingly." Mr. Balogun moved. Security was faster. The room had now abandoned all pretense of ceremony. People were standing, turning, filming. The television cameras, trained initially on the podium for routine footage, were now capturing everything. Ethan waited for the noise to settle to a manageable level before he continued. The staff who had treated people with dignity were called forward by name and informed of their promotions. A junior teller named Folklore, who had twice offered elderly customers her chair while they waited, was named customer service lead for the branch. Others received confirmations of permanent placement, increases, development opportunities. Those whose conduct had been the opposite were given envelopes. Mr. Balogun was walked out in full view of the cameras. When the formal business was done, Ethan stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted as he walked toward the back of the room, where Chisom stood near the entrance, having been quietly contacted that morning by Ethan's assistant and asked to come. She had not known why. She had dressed carefully anyway, in a yellow blouse and dark skirt, and she had come because, despite everything, some part of her had remembered his words from the previous afternoon. "Tomorrow, everything will make sense." He stopped in front of her. The cameras were still rolling. The room was watching. Chisom was aware of all of it and was doing an admirable job of standing very still. "You sat with me in a stairwell every day," Ethan said. "You shared your food with me when you could barely afford to feed yourself. You defended me in front of everyone when defending me cost you your job. You stood beside me without knowing who I was, without expecting anything from it." He paused. "You loved me when I had nothing but a mop in my hand." Chisom pressed her lips together. Her eyes were very bright. "I was dishonest with you about who I was," he said. "I won't ask you to forgive that easily. But I want the chance to be honest with you from here forward, for as long as you're willing to let me." The room waited. Chisom looked at him for a long moment, the way she had looked at him in the stairwell on the afternoon they were both escorted out, measuring, honest, unsentimental. "You could have told me," she said quietly. "I know. You should have told me. I know that too." She was quiet again. Then something shifted in her expression, not dramatic, not like in the films, but real and small and enough. "One step at a time," she said. He exhaled. The audience, which had been holding its collective breath, finally released it. The story did not end there. In the weeks after the ceremony, as the news coverage settled and the fraud case worked its way through the legal system, Ethan visited Chisom's home in Mushin with medicine and specialist appointments arranged for her mother. He went not with cameras or announcement but in ordinary clothes, carrying the bags himself from the car. Mrs. Patricia Nwosu, a small woman with Chisom's same sharp, observant eyes, received him at the door with the measured courtesy of someone who had not survived decades of hardship by being easily impressed. She served him zobo and gave him a long look. "My daughter," she said, "is not for entertainment." "I know, Ma," he said. "Good," she said, and refilled his cup. It was during his second visit, while helping sort through documents for Mrs. Nwosu's medical history, that Ethan found an old photograph tucked into the back of a worn album. A younger Mrs. Nwosu, a man he did not recognize, and a much younger Chisom, standing in front of a vehicle on the side of a road. In the background, barely visible, was a car he recognized because it appeared in another photograph, one his own mother kept in a frame at her home in Abuja. He went home that evening and called his mother. What she told him took several minutes to absorb. 22 years earlier, his father, Mr. Chidi Okafor, had been in a road accident outside Lokoja while traveling for work. The car had rolled. The driver had run. A passing civil servant had found him, organized a vehicle, transported him to the nearest hospital, stayed until the emergency was treated, and refused every attempt at payment or formal thanks. Before he left, that man had said something to Ethan's father that his father had repeated to Ethan many times over the years, mostly during conversations about how to live. Help someone else someday. The man's name had been Emmanuel Nwosu, Chisom's father. Ethan sat in his car outside his own building for a long time after he finished the call, looking at the city lights over the Lagos waterfront, thinking about the distance between that roadside in Lokoja and a marble-floored bank lobby, about all the years and choices and accidents that had moved these people toward each other without any of them knowing. Then he went inside and called Chisom. He told her everything. She was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different from her usual measured tone. Softer. Carefully held. "My mother never forgot him," she said finally, meaning her father. She said he used to say that kindness was the only investment that always paid. He was right, Ethan said. 6 months later, First Pinnacle Bank launched a community health initiative and a scholarship program for children from low-income households in Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Enugu. The scholarship was named in memory of Emmanuel Nwosu. Chisom led the foundation that administered it. She had not needed to be asked twice. At the launch event, Ethan spoke briefly. He said that the bank had been built to serve people, not to impress them. He said that service without dignity was not service at all. He said he had learned this in a stairwell from a young woman who carried a notebook of words she wanted to learn. Chisom, seated in the front row, did not look embarrassed. She looked like someone who had always known her own worth and had simply been waiting for the world to catch up. The closing narration of this story might go something like this. In a world that rewards performance and punishes sincerity, Ethan Okafor built a bank. But the thing he had been looking for could not be built. It had to be found, in a stairwell, in an ordinary conversation, between two people with no reason to trust each other except the small, stubborn human instinct that knows goodness when it sees it. Sometimes true love appears when pride disappears. And kindness sees what wealth cannot. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below and let me know which moment hit you the hardest. And share this with someone who believes that genuine people still exist in this world. Because they do. You just have to look past the uniform.